You sit down and try to be the rational adult. You explain your boundaries, hoping that if you just find the right words to describe your hurt, the other person will finally understand and stop. But the next day, they do it again. When you explain a boundary, you are inadvertently suggesting that the other person has the right to judge if your reason is valid. If they don't like the reason, they feel entitled to ignore the rule. This is why explanation is confession. It signals that your boundaries are up for negotiation. Think of disrespect as a diagnostic probe. A manipulator pings your border to see how much territory they can annex. This probe tracks your response. Reacting with anger shows them exactly where you are wounded. Going silent and submitting proves you have been domesticated. Recognizing this pattern is the first step toward neutralizing their influence. Once you see the disrespect as a data-gathering exercise rather than a personal attack, you can stop reacting and start responding procedurally. To reset the dynamic, you must adopt clinical detachment. Imagine a surgeon looking at a tumor. They don't yell at it or take its growth personally. They simply analyze its dimensions and decide on the procedure. There is no emotion involved, only observation. You are shifting the interaction into psychological asymmetry. Toxic people expect a mirror. They want their heat to be met with your heat. Instead, you offer them a complete lack of emotional resonance. Look at the thermometer. When their behavior spikes into a red, aggressive zone, you must drop to a stable baseline. You become factual, calm, and intentionally slow. If they call you too sensitive, do not list reasons why you aren't. Pause. Hold eye contact for 3 seconds. Then say with a flat, clinical tone, "That is a fascinating thing for you to say out loud." Then go right back to your work. You treat them like a biological specimen. By labeling their behavior as fascinating, you position yourself as the observer and them as the subject. This breaks their ability to predict your reactions. When you offer a wall of total nothingness instead of the expected emotional storm, their usual methods of control stop providing the results they need. While the gray rock method is about hiding, the dead drop is an active form of weaponized boredom. It is the refusal to acknowledge their importance. Diogenes the Cynic demonstrated this indifference with remarkable precision. He lived in a barrel and cared nothing for the social hierarchies of his time. When Alexander the Great stood over him and offered to grant any wish, Diogenes didn't bow or ask for wealth. He simply looked up and asked Alexander to move because the emperor was blocking his sunlight. This mundane indifference is devastating to a narcissist. It communicates that they are not the center of the world, but merely an obstacle to your comfort. They want to be the villain in your story. By treating them as background noise, you strip them of their influence and leave their ego with nothing to grasp. For verbal interactions, use the principles of verbal judo. Strip your speech of all emotional adjectives and stick strictly to nouns and verbs. Adjectives are emotional handles. Don't give the other person anything to grab onto. If they scream that you never do anything right with the dishes, avoid arguing about your worth. State the physical reality. The dishes are done, and they are in the rack. You can also deploy the return to sender protocol. Wait for a pause, keep your face relaxed, and ask, "Does screaming make you feel better?" You are asking about the function of their behavior, treating it as a curious performance. This diagram shows the 80-20 eye contact rule. Look at the forehead rather than the eyes. This prevents the other person from syncing with your fear through limbic resonance, keeping your internal state isolated from their pressure. If they make an accusation, use fogging. Agree with the possibility of what they're saying without accepting their toxic label. If they call you incompetent, say, "There were definitely errors in that project, and I see why you're frustrated." For shame-based attacks, use the Cato protocol. Cato the Younger intentionally walked around in the wrong clothes to desensitize himself to public opinion. If they call you selfish, just nod and say, "I am focusing on myself right now." When you refuse to buy into the shame, they lose their most powerful lever. By offering no hard surface to strike against, you starve the interaction of the friction required to sustain it. Applying these steps triggers the extinction burst, a massive, temporary escalation in toxic behavior when a person realizes their old manipulation methods are failing. It's like mashing a broken elevator button. They might spread rumors or escalate accusations to a fever pitch. Do not fold. This spike is evidence that your boundaries are finally holding. The system is mashing the button because the button no longer works. Following the explosion, watch for the Trojan horse. This is a sudden peace offering, a gift or a sweet shift in mood designed to pull you back into the old dynamic. Enforce the rule of zero debt. Accept no favors or gifts during this phase. If you accept a nice gesture, the social contract reactivates, and you are socially obligated to be nice in return, which usually means dropping your boundaries. Maintaining absolute zero debt is the only way to ensure you aren't pulled back in before the dynamic has fully reset. The final step is the most difficult, the psychological death of hope. You must stop waiting for the toxic person to change. Much of your suffering comes from expecting a scorpion to act like a puppy. When you stop hoping for a version of them that doesn't exist, you stop sticking your hand into their cage to be stung. When you drop all expectations, your internal energy shifts. You are no longer waiting for a specific outcome, which means you can no longer be manipulated by the promise of one. Predators look for a reaction. When they realize they can no longer trigger you, they will eventually move on to an easier target. Your peace is reclaimed not by changing them, but by becoming unreachable. The strategies I've shared today provide a foundation for clinical detachment. However, there are more nuanced aspects of behavioral psychology that require a more structured environment to discuss. If you are ready for a deeper dive into these mechanics, click the Join button and enter the Architect level. You will find more specific, in-depth breakdowns on navigating complex human dynamics. I'll see you there.